Okay, we are live, and we're waiting for Lawrence Chehardy. Hi, this is Steve Sabludowsky, BayouBuzz.com, and we're doing, I think, our very first Saturday webcast, Louisiana Political Roundup. And hopefully Lawrence can get on with us. He's trying with a iPhone, and I think that's kind of what the issue is for him. Nevertheless, we have Jim Brown and Tyler Bridges, and we're going to be talking about Louisiana politics. By the way, those people who are on Facebook, who are on Bayou Buzz or say Google Plus, basically there's you can ask us questions. Just go and to the very bottom of where there's a chat area, and just go ahead and ask questions or make your comments, and we'll be checking in to see exactly what you have to say. So Jim, Tyler, how y'all doing?
I'm doing great. In fact, Tyler and I both got up this morning. We both did our individual workouts, and so we're ready for a good hangout here today. We're doing all pumped up here today, Steve.
That's terrific. Tyler?
I second what Jim said.
Okay, well, I'm getting ready to do mine after this, so we'll all be pumped up after that, But okay, let's talk about pumping up the Louisiana politics. I mean, there's so much going on, and Tyler, I know that you've been up in Baton Rouge along with Jim, dealing with the Louisiana legislature, and why don't you just give us an overview, if you could, about what is going on up there in the second week of the Louisiana legislature?
Well, it's starting, I would say, a bit slowly. The governor, as you know, doesn't have much of an agenda, a very light agenda, and when that happens, and Jim could speak to this because he knows more about this than I do, that it sort of takes a bit of the energy out of the session, and it's not clear exactly what all of the main issues will be. But at least at this point, I would say the main issues are Common Core, which is the set of standards that Louisiana has joined a system with almost all the other states, and there is a group of conservatives who do not like this at all, and they are trying to either pull Louisiana out of Common Core, or at least modify it. Although I did a live chat with on Thursday with State Representative Cameron Henry, Republican from Metairie, one of the leaders of those who want to get rid of Common Core. We did a live chat where I work at the Lens, and Representative Henry told me that he didn't think they would be able to repeal Common Core this year. So Common Core is a big issue. Another big issue is the effort by State Senator Robert Adley and a couple others, senators and House members, to repeal or to kill the lawsuit filed by the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority against 97 oil and gas companies. So they're trying to kill it in the legislature so that that lawsuit will not go forward. And then there's, of course, issues with the budget, as there are every year.
So it seems like, if I might, it just seems like there's no agenda. I mean, it seems like it's more reactionary. Am I correct about that, or?
Well, I might pick up on what Tyler said. I think he hit it right on the head. I was a state senator for 8 years, and I was Secretary of State and Insurance Commissioner, and every single year I went to the legislature to hear the governor's agenda to set out priorities. Now, maybe legislators would disagree with those priorities, but governors in the past were very specific about, look, here's what we've got to get done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Buddy Romer did that. Kathleen Blanco did that. Mike Foster did that. Edwin Edwards always did that during his 4 terms as governor. Jindal just kind of came in and kind of wished everybody well and made a few general comments. And, of course, he's abdicated the role of being the aggressive leader in the legislature on his quest to seek national office. So I think that's what's happened. There's some floundering around. There's lots of voids. Common Core's found its niche. There's an effort primarily by Democrats to override the governor's efforts to not take all this federal money for health care. This lawsuit has some legs. The governor's kind of a little wishy-washy on it. And I don't mind the governor not setting the agenda. I think the legislature independently should set the agenda. But traditionally, the governor has. There's a void, and legislators are kind of floundering down there right now. I had breakfast this morning with several legislators, and they said they're each got their little individual packet of interests, but there's no overall focus on what we're trying to get done in terms of bigger issues.
Jim, can I jump in with a quick question, if I may? The fact that the governor does not have a major agenda or even much of an agenda this legislative session, does that mean that there are no major issues or problems that need to be addressed in Louisiana?
Well, there's a whole litany of issues. It's a question of the overall picture of addressing those issues. You take Common Core. I mean, Common Core has gone from something that was almost a throwaway. It was just so acceptable. The governors, including Bobby Jindal, adopted the Common Core idea. Nobody was against it at the time, and now it's gone down to micromanaging a few little issues in Common Core to make this an entire major issue. Shouldn't be a big issue, but it is. The health care funding shouldn't be a big issue. The things that are big issues really are things that a leadership role from the governor should have worked out months or years ago. So I don't see any major focus to change the direction of Louisiana to clean up a huge problem, because these niches are being cut out, things that should have been taken care of in a fairly routine manner, quite frankly. You take the lawsuit, for example. Well, everybody's got a right to file a lawsuit. There's no doubt about the fact that oil companies have, in some instances, have caused a great deal of damage. That's for the courts to iron out. That's for the courts to work at. If the lawsuits are frivolous, then fine the parties and fine the lawyers. That's how the legal system works. And all of a sudden it's become a legislative issue so that the oil companies can get their niche and not have to face this thing in court. Again, these are all less substantive issues that should have been worked out by leadership and the legislature and the governor months and years ago, but I think that on both sides they've abdicated this leadership role.
Well, let me ask you this from a theoretical standpoint. Isn't it better, of course I can make an argument to the opposite, but isn't it better to have the legislature do their business and then present it to the governor? Or, I mean, to me, the governor has too much control, too much power, no matter who the governor might be. So let me just throw it out to y'all.
I think you're right. Sure, ideally, that's what should happen. That's what happens in a number of other state legislators. But this hasn't developed here now, so the legislators are kind of walking around saying, well, we haven't heard from the governor, and there's no leadership emerging within the legislature itself to build that consensus. You have people like Representative John Bell Edwards, who's running for governor over in Hammond, who is putting forth an agenda. Karen Peterson, who's head of the Democratic Party. There's some individual ideas being thrown out, but as far as a party caucus, a South Louisiana caucus, a education caucus, in terms of one group building that consensus, that leadership has not risen to the occasion. There's a void because of the governor's lack of leadership, but the legislature hasn't quite matured enough to say, hey, we got a chance to really evolve and be our own leaders. That so far hasn't happened.
So what's the downside, if I might ask? I mean, is there a downside?
Well, the point I guess I would make, and again, Jim has more direct experience with this than I do, but my sense is in any democracy, and specifically the United States, direction will almost always come from the leader, whether it's the president or the governor or the mayor of a town. And legislatures generally will go along with that, or they will develop an anti-agenda. It's not very easy for a large group of men and women in a legislative arena to develop their own agenda. And as Jim points out, there's certainly not that tradition in Louisiana. And Chuck Cleckley, more than not, as the Speaker of the House, has been a guy who has gone along during his tenure with what the governor wants. John Alario, President of the Senate, a very, very able politician, but he has also generally gone along with what the governor wants. So if the governor's out there, then you're asking for a big change in behavior, and that's not really something I think we can expect very much of.
Steve, I might say this too. Governors have always been very strong in Louisiana, but my experience as a public official is that governors are receptive to legislative ideas. I remember back in the 70s when Edwards was governor. I went to him on authoring with Representative Pepe Bruno out of New Orleans an open meetings law and a Public Records Act to open up government a lot more. It really was an Edwards agenda, and he said, well, the time has probably come. I hear you. Yes, I'll include that. Let's all get together and push it. So governors were open for that kind of thing. Mike Foster, I took some insurance ideas to Mike Foster. He says, hey, that makes good sense. I'll put it in my agenda. So governors and legislators or other public officials traditionally could work together and kind of bond this relationship. The problem with Jindal is he's an absentee governor. I've had legislators tell me that outside of his opening address at the legislature, they've not laid eyes on him in a year or so. And these are some of his leaders, have not even seen him, let alone talk to him.
Yeah, I know that Tyler has written about that extensively last year, particularly. Tyler, why don't you give us some information about that?
Well, the sort of the refrain is, where's Bobby? I did a story before the legislative session began indicating that the governor didn't have much of an agenda, and at that point the only legislators, sort of following up on Jim's point, who had met with him recently have been the president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, and the chairs of the two budget writing committees. None of the legislators. And then I've been checking with key legislators since then, and none have, except this past Wednesday, the chairman of the various Senate committees had lunch with the governor. But other than that, I don't know of any substantive meetings that lawmakers have had with the governor. And Jim, you know, you've been in that Capitol as an elected official. Isn't that rather rare?
It's extremely rare. And like I say, maybe it wasn't in the governor's agenda, but legislators could bring things and include them in a working relationship. That happened with virtually every governor we've had so far. But Jindal is, Jindal gives a speech 3 or 4 times a week telling people all over the nation that the only job he wants is to be governor of Louisiana. Well, I wish he'd come on back and do that job, because it's really hurt in terms of building any coalition around some of these very important key issues. And then you've had the only separate aggressive role I've seen, well, there's been 2. Some effort by the Democratic Party with John Bell Edwards and Karen Peterson. The other thing is, Tyler mentioned Cameron Henry. David Vitter's influence in this legislature, building a more conservative coalition of younger legislators to kind of take on the governor a little bit and set out his focus, kind of take on his territory, if you will. You can see that coming from Henry and some other legislators. But outside of that, there's a lot of floundering going on in Baton Rouge right now.
Tyler, do you agree with that?
I'm sorry?
Do you agree? In terms of Cameron Henry, obviously y'all had that chat on the lens. And do you think that he's taken marching orders from Senator Vitter?
I don't think he's taking marching orders from Senator Vitter, but he is a political ally. And I had written a story before the legislative session where various people predicted that Senator Vitter, who has played in local politics in Louisiana in ways that are maybe unprecedented, at least in recent memory for a U.S. senator, that he will play a role in this session. And of course, he's announced his plans to run for governor. He and Bobby Jindal are not political allies, and one of the things that Vitter has done is helped elect various allies, particularly in the House, but in the Senate too, and Representative Henry is one of them.
Now, one last question about the session, if I might, and that is the lawsuits. I know that the governor had a press conference this week talking about one set of lawsuits dealing with the oil industry, the legacy lawsuits, but then there's a lawsuit down in southeast Louisiana with the levee district. And that's the one that Jim's talking about, dealing with, say, the legislature trying to stop that lawsuit that was filed. I'm just wondering, how much, how much does the oil and gas industry what are the likelihood or probabilities that they might be able to stop that lawsuit?
Let me jump in first, and then Jim, if you could follow me, because Steve, this is actually a topic that I've spent a fair amount of time working on the past week, because I'm writing a very lengthy profile of a guy that Jim knows, and that's State Senator Robert Adley. The reason I'm writing a piece for The Lens about Robert Adley is he is the main driver within the legislature of the effort to kill the lawsuit filed by the Levy District here in the New Orleans area. And Adley has several bills. They may be heard in his committee on Wednesday for the first time. But again, Jim, you can speak to your own experience with Robert Adley. But I've talked to a lot of people about him and spent time with Senator Adley in recent days, and he seems to be a very capable guy. But there's been no votes taken yet to gauge exactly how this effort will whether it will proceed or not. But Jim certainly has a historical knowledge of the power of the industry within the legislature in Baton Rouge.
I think it's unprecedented that the legislature would try to pass laws to stop an existing lawsuit, an ongoing lawsuit. We've got 3 branches of government, and we have a chance to get recompensation or air your grievances before the courts if you think the legislation is wrong or there's been damage done. And that's how it's been traditional in this state and every state in this country. And I can't remember going back when the legislature took action to stop a legal action in the courts. Oil industry is very, very strong in this state. I'll tell you what, though, I've seen some recent polls showing that the average voter out there is very much in favor of holding oil companies that do the damage. You know, you've got some, just like in anything else, you got good eggs and bad eggs. You've got some very responsible oil companies that have cleaned up after their damage. You've got others who have not. And there are some problems in the litigation because there might have been damage done 30 years ago. We can't find those people anymore. They've gone bankrupt. So it's a very complicated issue of cleaning up. I just think it's unprecedented that the legislature would try to stop ongoing litigation, whether it's fair or not. That's what the courts should work out in terms of who's responsible. So, and I don't think it's a good political issue, too, quite frankly. I'll have to give this projection way out front. I think this litigation is going to be a very key issue in this 6th District congressional race. And if you come out and say you're for the oil companies, you don't have a shot of getting close in terms of this election. So it's a complicated issue, but and let's go back to Adley. Let me explain. I think Robert Adley's a first-rate legislator, but he's very much involved in the oil business. He's become their boy, if you will. So it's going to be if they can do this in this issue, does it mean that every year when certain legislators don't like litigation going on, they're going to try to wipe it out through legislation? I think that's a dangerous precedent to begin going on, quite frankly.
You know, I'm very surprised that you're Jim, that you said that the 6th District that they're opposed to the legislation. I mean, you have oil companies, establishments going up the river. So isn't that the 6th District in part, or?
It is, but I think it's a question of looking at the damage being done. You go down to Lafourche, coming on up the river, over in Laplace. All of those areas have had massive flooding, and I think those people are convinced that part of the flooding is due to the various canals done by oil companies, and there's been no mitigation. You know, you're right, the oil companies are very strong, but you've got oil service groups, and you've got a cross-section of other groups there that are not part of the problem. And so I think it's just a basic premise that, look, if you injure or damage something or someone, you need to clean up the mess that you made. That's just basic to our law system. So, and I've seen some recent polls, quite frankly. The issue is overwhelming against the oil companies in terms of their responsibility. Not beating up on them, not penalizing them, but if you individually cause damage, you got to clean up your damage. You got to make recompense. And that's going to be a strong issue, I think, Steve.
What about the session?
Steve, can I ask Jim a question?
Sure.
Jim, you said that you thought that any candidate with the oil companies would not advance in that 6th Congressional District, which is centered on Baton Rouge. Well, Garrett Graves, who was the chairman of the governor's
Sure.
effort to rebuild the coast, has been one of the leading critics of that levee board lawsuit. So are you suggesting that you don't think he'll advance as a candidate?
I think he's got the albatross around his neck of being the guy that was supposed to be confecting the plan to clean up and try to straighten out and deal with coastal problems. Now all of a sudden he's on the other side of the issue. It's going to be a tough issue for him to defend, quite frankly, and what looked like a bright beginning for him may cause him some problems down the line. He's going to find out a way to explain that to people that want very solid, simple solutions, and it's a tough issue to make simple. And so I think that's going to be a real Achilles heel for him, yes.
Let's just talk a second about the lawsuits. One of the things I'm seeing is lobby Louisiana business industry. Basically, they're taking some really big stands. We have a new president, CEO, in terms of Stephen Waguespack. And their position is that, number one, on that lawsuit, that we have greedy attorneys, greedy trial attorneys, and so that they're basically surrogates, as far as I'm concerned, for Bobby Jindal on that. That was Jindal's phrase, the greedy trial attorneys. And secondly, the other big issue for lobby is the jury trials. What they want to do is they want to reduce the threshold. My question about that issue is, from what I remember back in the 80s with Dan Juneau, I think they were the ones who actually wanted to raise the threshold, and now they're saying they want to lower it. They wanted to raise it because they thought they were getting socked by these quote runaway juries. So I'm just kind of confused. My head's spinning on all this.
Well, I can answer that. I'm a lawyer. I don't practice anymore, but I practiced for many, many years. The knock is that a jury, if you are being sued, that the knock on the change is that you can wear down the plaintiff. You got a plaintiff that say he's been injured in the case of the oil companies or some other issue, and they file suit. If you have a jury trial, it takes a lot longer. You can find all kinds of reasons to cause delays. Or if it goes before a judge and both sides agree it should go before the judge, it's just a simpler lawsuit. It moves on a lot quicker. And you're right, Lobby was all for the simplicity of the judge ruling on anything up to $50,000 unless both sides wanted it. Both sides asked for a jury trial. You can have it for $10, quite frankly. Well, now Lobby, as you said, has switched. My friend C.B. Ferguson, who's been a big critic of the governor, says their name is not Lobby anymore, it's Jobby.
Jobby, yes.
The Jindal, with Jindal, kind of because Mr. Wagenspack came from Jindal, and that there's a Lobby is merely an extension of the governor. That I'm not sure how fair that is, but it's just the knockout there. So,
okay, let me interrupt and just say, look, I interviewed Waguespack when he first took the job, and I have not seen one thing, not one thing, where he differs from the governor. In fact, when the governor comes out with something, say once a week or once every 2 weeks, that he's taking a stand, Waguespack writes about it in the same issue in favor of it. The only thing that I see a little wobbly is Common Core. Lobby strongly in favor of Common Core. Jindal has been a little squishy, it seems, only because the conservatives have taken issue with it. Other than that, I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree with C.B. Ferguson on this. It's a jobby, and they're doing a jobby on Louisiana.
Well, I don't have an opinion one way or the other on that. The only thing I would point out, though, is that Stephen Waguespack works for somebody. He works for the board of Lobby, and if he pulls the organization, which has been very powerful into the years in recent years under Dan Juneau, his predecessor, that if WAGISPAC pulls the organization too far, one would presume that the board would rein him in unless the board wants him to go in that direction.
Well, all I do is, Steve, is point out what you said. Dan Juneau, I don't know of a governor that Dan Juneau didn't differ with on some key issues, including Bobby Jindal. Now it's early. WAGISPAC's not been there that long, and maybe that's going to change. But right now, it looks like lobby is, or jobby, as we joke about, is a rubber stamp for the Jindal agenda. And unfortunately, that agenda doesn't seem to be set by Jindal. It's set by the second level people around him, because Jindal's not around. So again, the confusion of who's in charge, what the agenda is causing some real ups and downs in the legislature right now.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about the 6th Congressional District. Last week we had a Hangout and a webcast on, and basically what we talked about was Edwin Edwards. And I attended the event this past week dealing with Edwards and Blanco and Romer. And there's no question in my mind Edwards is, I mean, he's probably lost a little bit in terms because of his age, but boy, is he sharp. And I told him that personally, and it's, my statement is up on Bayou Buzz in the interview I did with him. Although I still have a real question as to whether he can win. I asked him about that, whether or not, and he says, well, you know, you got to be foolish to enter a race if you think that maybe you can't win. Now, Jim, I know that you're close with Edwards. You're the publisher of the biography, and I'm just wondering, you know, what are you hearing at this point in time regarding Edwards and his congressional run?
Well, I don't talk to the governor about his campaign. I've been an observer, as you said, and published the biography through my publishing company. That's been the biggest selling book in the history of Louisiana. In fact, with his announcement, there's been a big push for more books, and I'm tickled to death about that. Edwards, he is giving some pretty decent answers. I mean, you raised the question about age. Seniority used to be so important in Washington, D.C. You sat there and paid your dues, and after 10 or 15 years, maybe the chairman of the committee you're on would even know your name. That's changed a whole lot. You look at the three key leading Republican candidates for president in this country today. They're all young senators who've only been there a couple of years. You've got Rand Paul, that's leading most of the polls right now. You've got Marco Rubio, and you've got Ted Cruz over in Texas. They're new kids on the block, and they've made an immediate impact. So Edwards will tell you that they've made that kind of impact. They are senators, number one. So as far as the age thing, you deal there with that problem. I think that Edwards has got a pretty good message of reaching across the aisle. People just are sick and tired of the Republic can'ts and the demo don'ts, is what I'm finding, Steve. And so his message is, look, he worked across the aisle. If the Republicans are right, he's going to work with them. If the Democrats are right, he's going to work with them. So on message, I think he starts off pretty well. The overriding issue is, will voters be so turned off because of his reputation, the conviction, and that kind of thing, that they just can't vote for him? And so what I think is going to happen is Edwards gets to the runoff. He's going to have a pretty solid, locked-in 42 to 45% vote in any runoff situation. And can he find a way to make 4 or 5% more of the people say, look, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Edwin Edwards? And so that's the challenge he has, and it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge.
Tyler?
Yeah, as we talked about in our last Hangout, the district was set up to elect a Republican. That's what the Louisiana legislature did. And in 2010, in those same boundaries of that district, when David Vitter faced Representative Charlie Melanson for the Senate election, Vitter won about 63% of that vote. And so that's kind of the Republican performance. And also McCain won that district in 2008, and with over 60% of the vote, and so did Mitt Romney in 2012 against Barack Obama. So, but Jim also, I thought, made a very interesting point in last week in the Hangout, which is that maybe the Republicans beat up on each other so much that their candidate is bruised and battered going into the runoff. But I think any analysis of the district, you have to say that it's for Edwin Edwards to win would be a pretty big upset.
Except, and I would agree with Tyler on that, Steve, except that when you go down the bayou, for example, there's a heavy vote in South Louisiana. Well, the fact that this colorful Cajun, who an awful lot of those people loved and voted for many, many times, will that, I don't want to say rock star, but Edwards has a persona that's bigger than life that really gets people excited. They may not vote for him, but they love to talk to him. They think he's funny. He captivates a crowd. Can that energy that no other Democrat can express, can that overcome the difference that Tyler just explained? Can you get enough folks down that way? It's a Republican district, but actually it's about 50-50 in terms of registration, Republican and Democrat. Now, many of those Democrats vote Republican. They do, though, year after year. Can he turn those votes around? And the other thing, and Tyler referred to our comments last week, you know, if you get kind of a beat-up Republican in that race, then Edwards is not going to spend any money in the first primary. He's going to have all his money left for the runoff. And you may have a Republican who really hasn't defined him or herself, that they're there, they slipped in, but to the average voters, they were one of many who were running to make the runoff spot. Can Edwards' money then define that candidate in a very negative way? So if Edwards is going to spend $1 million, $2 million beating up on that Republican, will that have the effect? And it's such a we can't go back in history and look at many examples like this. You don't have someone with the age factor with Edwards, with his conviction, all those things involved. Can he gel with a number of those votes? And that's something that the political prognosticators, the consultants, and the pollsters have still not come to any conclusion on.
You know,
if I could just make an additional comment, is I'd point out that it's been 23 years since Edwin Edwards last ran for political office, and that's an awfully long time. And some of those very strong Edwards supporters who remember him particularly from the 70s, many of them have passed on, and so there'll be a number of voters in that district who do not know Edwin Edwards. Maybe their parents will tell them about Edwin Edwards, but I have to say, for a guy who has not run in 23 years and then spent 8.5 years in federal prison, and Steve, you saw him live the other night, there does not seem to be a lot of rust.
No, I mean, the guy basically had the entire crowd in his hands, and I really mean it. So, I mean, he was so funny. The interview was up on, and the actual, what we did was we took an audio and we put up his quips. Now, this is not an endorsement of Edwards. I have a real issue, with him. But as if he doesn't make it as a congressman, I think there's still a role for him as a talk show host. Jimmy Fallon, watch out.
That's the other thing I'll mention is Tyler talked about that so many of his older supporters dying out. I don't know of any other candidates that are tweeting every day, that have an aggressive Facebook page where videos are posted on it already. If you go to Edwards and look at his Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, his Instagram account, pictures are going up. So any of your viewers out there watching us, they ought to check out some of those accounts. He's doing more in the social media than all the other candidates put together right now. So
well, his wife is, and I thought that was really interesting. I asked her, well, who's running the campaign, and she said that she is. So I find that amazing.
Well,
I mean, she has no experience. I'm not saying she's not capable, but why is Edwards, who is in this? I mean, this is his last hurrah, I guess, and why is he going to leave it up to his wife, who has no political experience at all?
Well, I think when they're kicking off this early stage, she's playing a major role. I know I've talked to several consultants who say that they've been interviewed by the governor for media, for being the overall campaign manager, for fundraising, and so so I think look, that guy's been around the block a few times, and I don't know. Look, I've spent in my short political life, well, long political life, but I've spent $8 to $10 million in running for public office. If I've spent 8 to 10, Edwin Edwards has had to spend $40 or $50 million. So this guy ain't no novice when it comes to knowing the importance of having solid consultants to get you elected. He's done
Sure.
so. And I think he's going to have a first-rate team out there that actually, right now, he's sitting back and raising money and watching the other fellas all fight for a runoff spot. That's really all he has to do, and then go make appearances. He doesn't need to beg people to get him known and have introduction videos. By the way, if you go to his Facebook page, you'll see a very professional video. Trina Edwards did not do that video. He's already got somebody doing some first-rate video work for him to put up that kind of things on Facebook. He's way ahead of the game of the other candidates at this stage.
Tyler?
I think Jim said it very clearly. I can't really add anything to that.
Now, there's also another election this year. The election takes place the same day, and that's the U.S. Senate race. The big question is Mary Landrieu, whether or not she's able to win the fourth term. Something that Edwards said, and I actually wrote a column about this. It's up on Bayou Buzz right now. He said that when asked about Obamacare, he called it whether or not you can keep your own doctor and your own policy. He called it the lie of the decade, and I seized on that and said, well, I don't think Mary really wanted to hear that, although he was very supportive of the Obamacare on other issues, such as pre-existing conditions, the portability aspect of it. So I'm just wondering whether or not Edwards is going to be a positive or negative or just a wash in Landrieu campaign and vice versa.
Well, go ahead, Tyler. You want to start off?
I would just say, we can't say definitively. I think we can say that the argument in favor of Edwards helping Mary Landrieu is that he is a Democrat, and he's a guy who will probably bring out voters, probably especially African-American voters that no other Democrat on the ballot in that 6th Congressional District would do. So that's the argument, that he will help Mary Landrieu, and particularly in the runoff, because I think it's fair to assume that Edwards would make the runoff. The counter-argument is that there are people out there who don't like him and would be reminded of the reasons they don't like him, and that might draw some people to the polls who would vote against Edwards and then also vote against Mary Landrieu.
I would think, and I agree with Tyler on that, I think Edwards helps Mary Landrieu by generating more people getting to the polls. Unless something very dramatic happens, there are runoffs in both these races. Mary Landrieu cannot win this race in the first primary. So assuming they're both in a runoff, it's going to be harder to get people to the polls. I think they help each other in their effort to turn out a vote, an African-American vote, traditional Democratic vote, as Tyler stated. So I don't think anything off Edwards is going to affect Mary Landrieu. Mary Landrieu has been pretty well defined, and she's going to be pounded for months to come over Obamacare. And it's interesting that Edwards says what a terrible lie it is, and Mary Landrieu keeps defending it. She's got that wrapped around her neck. She's got the president, and she's got the Obamacare issue wrapped around her neck. So she's not going to be hurt by Edwards on the ballot. I think he's going to help her get out that traditional vote. She's got an uphill fight. I was looking at some numbers this morning earlier, Steve, about confidence in the country. What party do you have the most confidence in? Generally, you go back over the last 20 years, it's about 40-40, Democrat, Republican, maybe a little higher one or the other. The confidence in the Democrats solving problems under the leadership of Barack Obama, in the poll I saw today, respected poll, was about 24%. When you're down that low, then there are some independent voters who are going to say, look, I don't care what she's done. We just got to have a change in this direction for this country. And so Mary Landrieu carries that albatross around her neck of that feeling to a number of voters Obamacare, the president's unpopularity, of which she's been an ardent defender, and I don't think this stuff about being a committee chairman or anything along that line really carries that much weight. So she's going to have an awful lot of money to solve her problem, and it's going to be a real barn burner. By the way, a little inside gossip for you. Mary had a fundraiser last night down in New Orleans. Carole King came, the singer Carole King. There were 100 people, paid $1,000 each, and it was a private home down in New Orleans. Apparently went very, very well. So if you're a Carole King fan, she's locked on to Mary Landrieu for whatever the rumor monitor is worth.
You know, I have a real question there, and you mentioned that the Democrats are down in the low 20s. Well, the Republicans, from what I understand, are down lower than that. Unless there's a different poll, the Republicans were in the teens.
This is members of Congress. I didn't see that in terms of do you have confidence in terms of who can lead the country. When you're down to 24%, traditionally you go back over the last 50 years, you can rise maybe 15% above that, but getting to 50% that can really affect other elections is just a very hard road to knock. So. So in any event, and Landrieu, she's got the office. You know, she's the issue. The issue probably is not going to be Bill Cassidy's a nice guy, a doctor, and got a sweet wife who's a doctor, and you're not going to be voting though, quite frankly, for Bill Cassidy. You're going to go into that voting box and make a referendum on Mary Landrieu, either for or against her. And in my opinion, that's what's going to be the decisive factor in the election.
You know, I was just thinking the other day that let's assume that Mary Landrieu loses. So now you basically have a rookie at the U.S. Senate. You give up that incredibly important position in terms of the Energy Committee. Now let's assume that David Vitter decides that he's going to run for governor. And he wins. Well, now you have another rookie in his place. So I'm not, again, this is not a support of anything, but Louisiana could be in a situation where it has two rookies as U.S. Senate. I got to tell you, personally, and I've got issues with all the candidates running for U.S. Senate, but I personally believe that there is something to the question of seniority. Mary Landrieu, to her credit, actually spearheaded the recent, and I know that you may take issue with this, Jim, but she spearheaded the insurance bill that the Republicans and Democrats and the business community praised, the FEMA insurance bill, and so. Had she not had the seniority, we have some real questions as to what would have happened with that. And the insurance premiums, although it's not perfect bill, the insurance premiums would have skyrocketed. So to just say seniority doesn't matter. I don't care whether it's, in my view at least, I don't care if it's Republican, Democrat, if it's House or Senate, if it's Louisiana legislature. I think seniority does matter. It should matter.
Well, there's two separate questions. One is, does it matter for the state? And I think anybody who looks at it would say, yeah, it does matter. It's for the reasons you just pointed out. But then there's the second question: will that matter to very many people who go to the ballot box later this year? And my guess is not that many. And so, having that position will matter to political insiders. It will help her certainly raise money, but the ordinary person who goes to the ballot box, I just don't get a sense of that.
Sure.
Well, let me just share this. Let me play the devil's advocate. I love to do that with you. We have a lot of fun doing that. But look, I've been around for 25, 30 years watching about all this seniority up in Washington, D.C. So you take the Energy Committee. We had Senator Bennett Johnson that was head of the Energy Committee, the chairman. Offshore oil money, we're still getting virtually nothing from the offshore oil that's being done. Mitigation and damages, it's carrying on. I'm not sure what we've gained from all that. You know, what would have happened if we didn't have any oil in this state? Back in 1955, 1950, all the southern states are on about the same even par. We had the oil, and what happened? Alabama jumped way ahead of us. Georgia jumped way ahead of us. Tennessee did. Arkansas did. In virtually every standard we set, they're up above us. They had no oil and gas. So, you know, you can get into energy and oil and gas, and I'm not beating up on the oil companies. I've got a lot of friends that work in it. But, you know, you take what you have, but lots of other states have jumped way ahead of us without any oil and gas. And I haven't seen this seniority bottom line out of anything specific for us over all these years. Sure, you know, maybe you got somebody appointed to a special job, but in terms of legislation affecting the average voter who's going into that voting machine, I'm not sure they're convinced it's done any good. And then I also think the voters, like the, you know, I want to say, don't want to use foul language, but the shit kickers out there, you know, the Ted Cruzes, the Rand Pauls, they're out there stirring a lot of people up, not just the Tea Party people. Like I say, those two guys are the leading candidates for president of this country in the Republican Party. So voters are cynical, they're upset, they're mad, they don't like either party, and so it's a pretty good, look, if I were running this time around, I'd sure rather be running as the challenger rather than as the incumbent.
Well, you know, the thing is that some of the same people who are, say, embracing Ted Cruz and, say, Rand Paul, they were out there screaming and kicking and crying about Bill Clinton and Barack Obama's and well, their lack of experience. I mean, I've read that they've said that Obama was the least experienced person running for governor. So, I mean, running for president. So, I don't know. I just think that seniority, in my mind, again, I think seniority doesn't matter. In terms of
you won big.
Yeah.
You won big. Bill Clinton beat an incumbent president. Won big. So. Yeah. As I say, and they were the challengers. So
no, I'm not talking about whether or not somebody can win or lose. Yeah, we know that somebody who has, say, you know, the who's telegenic and you know, can get the crowd roused up, that person can win, whether it's U.S. or local politics. But to me, is the government, is the state or the country served better by having experience? And, you know, my opinion is yes, it served a lot better.
Well, certainly, if I were a U.S. Senator, I'd want to be chairman of the committee and have a big plush office out that way. But I'll go back to
Jim. Now that's, you know, you're going to say that. I mean, you ran for, you were state senator. You ran for Secretary of State. You won insurance commissioner. You don't think that prior experience was a benefit for you in terms of insurance commissioner?
Sure. Benefit for me, but I go back to what Tyler said. I think that when an overwhelming majority of voters go in to pull that lever, the fact that someone's been up there for a number of years isn't going to make that much difference in turnout. You see, in who actually votes. That's the point.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I'm talking about the actual impact upon the government, the country, the state, whatever. Do we rather have a bunch of rookies at U.S. Senate and House of Rep, in the State Department, in the administration? Is that what we want? Is that what we want? Are we saying that experience doesn't make any difference?
Well, look, we can debate this as long as you want. I can go back over. I wrote a column about a month or so ago at JimBrownUSA.com talking about what Louisiana has gotten back from the federal government. We have all our oil and gas taken away from us, and I'll go down the list. This may not be the best time to do this, but you take highway funds. We send, for every dollar we send to Washington, we get about 90 cents back. Nursing homes, we get much less, way much less than the national average coming in to our nursing homes, and that amounts to billions of dollars. Level after level shows me that we haven't often gotten a fair shake and who's been representing us up that way. And so you take the whole flood insurance thing that we talked about. First of all, why did those rates have to go up in the first place? Because our big, strong congressional delegation let it slip right by them.
Sure, so if we have a bunch of rookies running government, then we're going to do better?
Well, how do you define a rookie? A pretty sharp businessman or woman going up there who takes business practices and puts a good staff together. That don't bother me. I'd like to see some very effective folks along that line. We've got some pretty sharp congressmen. You know, Steve Scalise has not been there that long, but has built up a pretty strong base in terms of who he represents. Let's see, who's the congressman over in Southwest Louisiana? The doctor over there, Bustani. Hadn't been there that long, very close to the speaker, built up his particular base. So, you know, that's where talent comes in. And, you know, you can argue it several ways, but I just don't think it's going to have an effect on whether you and I agree on this. When it comes to election time, all that experience, if Mary Landrieu tries to tout all that experience, I don't think that's going to be the turning factor in how whether people vote for her or against her.
And I agree with you there. I just disagree with the quality of the government. Tyler, you want to chime in here? I have one more area of or topic that I want to talk about. But do you want to chime in on this part?
I think you guys have said it all.
Gotcha. I thought you'd say that. You know. Okay. So, last topic deals with our governor, someone who has a lot of experience on the road. Governor Edwards, when he was asked about Governor Jindal, said, and this just took down the House. He said that he thought that Governor Jindal will probably get a position in government, probably as a secretary, and he said that in fact, you know, Secretary of Transportation would be perfect for him because he likes to travel so much. And really, the audience roared. My question is Jindal going to make a comeback here in Louisiana? Is he going to come back here in Louisiana, or is he lost forever? Tyler?
What do you mean when you say lost?
Okay, I mean, for an example, Chris, you know, is going to Las Vegas to raise some money this weekend, I believe. I don't know if Jindal's going to be there, but you know, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that he's running for president. He admitted just last week that it's now on his mind. So, you know, he's making some. You know, it seems to us now that he's definitely running. There's an article in Politico that we actually cited in Bayou Buzz that he has the best infrastructure set up than any other candidate running for GOP for the president. So has Louisiana? So has Louisiana? Can we just say goodbye to him as a leader, especially given what's happened this year in the legislature?
I think the time that a governor really shows leadership and really is most active is just before a legislative session and during the legislative session, and we're not seeing that from Bobby Jindal. And if he is indeed running for president, and all the evidence shows that he is, then I think it's logical to assume that he will be spending more and more time on his presidential campaign, less and less time on his Louisiana duties, and he'll be traveling more and more. It just seems logical to assume that.
Jim?
Well, I think Tyler's right. It's a question of what the future is for Jindal. I don't think that he's going to end up being on a national ticket for president or vice president. Would he consider a cabinet job? I think he would, and that may be a possibility for him. I think the question you start off with, does he have any future here in Louisiana? What happens if he doesn't go to Washington, D.C.? Can he come back? And I think that has a bearing on in terms of the governor's race. David Vitter and he don't get along, and I don't think, you know, once you become governor, and I think either Vitter or Darden or whoever the next governor may be is going to learn from Jindal's mistakes and take a much better flow in terms of the politics of the state. And I think Jindal's got an uphill fight of coming back. He could come back and run for maybe an open seat. U.S. You know, let's assume that Vitter wins. He appoints his replacement. 1 year later, there is an election for U.S. senator. I guess Jindal would consider that as an option to come back and win. But he's dug a pretty good hole. I was up in Jackson, Louisiana yesterday for the Jackson pilgrimage, the old homes, and I'm sitting there, and some of the very sweet older ladies who run that whole thing were there having lunch, and one of them recognized me and called me over, and they brought up Bobby Jindal, and these are older ladies, more traditional valued, a lot of Republicans, and they sat there and castigated Jindal for a long, long time. So he's dug himself a heck of a hole, and I think it's going to be hard for him. And plus, I don't think he's enticed about that. I think he wants to get on the national scene. He's got an uphill fight to do it. Give me $100, and if I had to bet on where Bobby Jindal is going to be 2 years from now, he's probably going to be one of those guys on Fox News analyzing the news, like most of the other Republicans who don't make it do it. That's where I'd see him 2 or 3 years down the line.
Tyler? Any follow-up on that?
Again, Jim says it all so well.
By the way, can I just chime in? I thought a very interesting thing yesterday. Did you see that the very popular sheriff down in Jefferson Parish, where David Vitter lives, Sheriff Newell Norman, has almost $2 million in his bank account? Very popular guy. Comes out and says he's supporting Jay Darden, the lieutenant governor, for governor this next time around, and he's going to take a very active role, and his focus is to raise money for Jay Darden. I think that was very notable in terms of the potential governor's race and the perceived strength of David Vitter. There's some chips in that armor. We'll talk about that in a later show, but I thought that was very interesting yesterday about Sheriff Norman strongly coming out for Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden.
And the reason, and we're going to end the show real soon, in fact, within a second or so, but I think the reason that he cited is exactly the reason that something that you and I have talked about and so many others have talked about, and that is that David Vitter does not get along with people. He is divisive. And I think that Newell Norman has picked up on that, and I think that's people who get to know David Vitter are going to just see that. Jay Darden is a Republican. He's strong, and I think that once they pit one against the other, one has a personality, the other one doesn't. I think that we're going to have at least a contest in the Republican Party.
No doubt about it. Well, Steve, I've enjoyed it. I'm on my way, Tyler, to tell you my day. I'm on my way to Hammond for a 12-year-old granddaughter's doubleheader, not one soccer game, but two. So I'm taking my chair and a great big Diet Coke, and I'm going to sit out there with my shades on and watch soccer all afternoon. I hope you guys have a nice weekend, and all of our viewers have a nice weekend, too.
Tyler, thank you so much, and sorry that Lawrence Chehardy could not make it. He had a technical issue on his side. So, okay, well, we'll have to do it again real soon. Thanks a lot, and keep watching Bayou Buzz and The Lens and Jim Brown. Your website is?
JimBrownUSA.com. Invigorating articles. But not quite as invigorating as Tyler Bridges, though, on The Lens. So I'd recommend both. That's a great way to spend your weekend, reading The Lens and reading JimBrownUSA.com.
And then if you have nothing to do, watch and listen and read BayouBuzz.com. Listen, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.